Hello, ACT students. My name is Miss Carter, and I'm going to be walking you through the ACT prep this year. We will be holding live sessions at the Loft in St. John's and at the Lodge here in Round Valley. I really hope you can join us for some of those. Most of the time we'll be at the Loft on Monday and Tuesday afternoons and over here at the Lodge on Wednesday and Thursday afternoons after school. Be sure to check the flyers that are hanging everywhere for your exact dates. Just because we won't be meeting over spring break week or any of the weeks that maybe have a Monday holiday or something, which we have one of those coming up because we know that people travel and it's a lot harder to make sure that you're available on those weeks. So we want to match your schedule. If you're joining us this way, we're so happy to see you. We know that you're really busy, probably after school with sports or music or drama, or some of you work, of course. So we're really happy that you can prep for your ACT class with us at a time that's convenient for you. We'll probably be recording all of the actual prep sessions. You'll notice on the flyers that some of the sessions are for actual practice time, where we'll be doing an English practice, say, or a math practice. And we probably won't record those, but if I have any materials available for those, I will be leaving them for you at those locations. And we also have several ACT manuals that are there if you would like to sit down in the education room or somewhere at one of those facilities and then go ahead and practice on your own. I'll be leaving you page numbers if we're using those books for the actual practice dates. So just know that you'll still have the materials even if we don't have a video for that session, since what we'll probably be doing is mostly hands-on work. I do want you to know that on Friday, March 31st, we'll be doing a morning session at the Loft and an afternoon session at the Lodge, where we'll be taking the full ACT practice test. We'll be timing ourselves, and then at the end of that, we'll be grading it and going over a few of the answers together. Since both of the schools take their ACT test on April 4th this year, we thought it would be a great opportunity for you guys to go ahead and take the full practice test and really get a feel for how long it is, how much time you have on each section, really put all of those tips and techniques that we've been learning over the weeks into practice before you take your actual test on Tuesday, April 4th. So we think it's going to be really excellent. We'll be trying to get you guys pizza or something. We really just want you to hit the ACT test completely prepared as you can be. So now I am going to go ahead and stop this video so that I can share my screen with you. And all right, why do we worry about ACT prep? Well, the reason that we worry about ACT prep is pretty obvious. If you can get a really great ACT score, it helps you get into a really good school. School options are much more open to you, and you can also earn some really excellent scholarship money. I've had students that were in my ACT prep class that ended up taking their practice SAT test. And even though it was only their junior year, they got offered a lot of money to go to some pretty fancy schools because they did so well. So this is a test that can really help launch your future. If you don't want to get into a lot of debt going to college, and who would want to get into a lot of debt, but it seems to kind of be the case these days that happens. Well, one great way to get some extra money to attend schools to do really, really well on the ACT test. Not all colleges and universities are requiring an ACT or SAT score these days, but if you can show that you have a really great score on this test, it can really help earn you some of those scholarship dollars that are hard to compete for. All right, here's the difference in median annual earnings. So if you just take a look at this chart real quick, you can see that if you finish school with a high school diploma, you can expect to earn about $37,000 a year. If you look just to the left of that, if you don't end up graduating from high school, you already are earning about $10,000 less a year, which in Arizona puts you pretty close to the poverty line. It's not a lot of money to live on. However, if you can go to college and finish a 4-year degree, in other words, you finish with your bachelor's either in science or art, something like that, you can earn about $61,000 a year, just on average. And over an entire lifetime of work, you've made another $1 million. You can do a lot of things with $1 million. So we're really hoping that everyone here plans on going to college, finishes their bachelor's degree, so they can take advantage of all this extra money that's on the table just based on how long you go to school. All right. What stops people from going to college? There are so many reasons why people don't really think college is for them. They don't end up applying. And a lot of those reasons are really legitimate, but we can kind of look at them together. So some people are just kind of afraid. Maybe nobody in their immediate family, maybe not their parents or grandparents graduated from college, and they have no idea how to tackle it. How do you start? Will it just put you in debt? What am I getting into? Can I handle this? Just know that a lot of people are starting from this point. And the best thing you can do is just ask questions. You can talk to your high school counselors. You can talk to us at the Loft or the Lodge. You can talk to me. I ended up calling some schools when I was getting ready to get started and just asking very basic questions. They seem silly now, but they were very helpful on the phone. They will help get you started. They'll give you the paperwork and they'll tell you what you need to kind of get your ducks in a row. We already talked about the money part. ACT can really help you access great scholarship money and financial aid. It just really shows the schools that you're capable of critical thinking and that you can kind of compete with your fellow students, which all of you can. And don't worry about not knowing what you want to do. I talk to a lot of high school students that are a little bit nervous about jumping, into college because they don't know what they want to do yet. That's typically not a huge worry for your first year or two of college. A lot of people are taking the same sort of general education requirement classes, and the wider variety of classes you can take at the beginning, the better off you will be. You'll find something that fits you. A lot of times your subject will find you. So you may be in, I don't know, say an art class or something and find out that photography is your thing. Or you may be in a writing class and talking to some other students and find out that business is your thing, or journalism or writing. There's so many things out there that you can do. So just go ahead, jump in. Your subject will find you, I promise. All right. Here is a great website. This is just Big Future, and I have some handouts that I'll be leaving at the Loft and the Lodge for you. If you attended any of our live sessions, I've probably already handed this to you. Bigfuture.org is run by the College Board. They're the people that put together the SAT stuff. Our schools actually take the ACT, but their goal is that 55% of Americans will have a college degree by 2025. We're quite a bit below that right now, so we have a little bit of a gap to make up. But they do have a dashboard, and just by completing steps on the dashboard, in other words, doing your sort of college application checklist, stuff like that, they will enter you each month to win scholarship money. And last year, they gave away about $3 million for students preparing to go to college. If you are a first-generation college student, they have wonderful information on how you can get started. If you're an undocumented student, don't let that stop you. There are a lot of resources on that site for you to avail yourself of, so let us know if we can help you with that. Lots of plugins to financial aid resources. If you don't know what you want to do and that has you worried, there's lots of career exploration and searches on there. And there are also lots of prep lists and checklists that you can use to kind of get ready to start that journey. A list of questions to ask your advisors, maybe things you haven't thought about before, and then also information on the FAFSA. I know that over here in Round Valley, they usually have like a FAFSA night, at least one, where they help all of their students fill out the free application for federal student aid. I can't tell you how important that is. So if you need help filling out your FAFSA, or if you get stuck filling out your FAFSA, this is especially your senior year, let us know and we will help you. But I will have all this information available for you in a packet. If you just swing by the Lodge or the Loft, they will be able to hand it to you. All right. At this point, a lot of students are thinking, is it the end of the world if I don't get to go to college? And it's not. There are lots of other options. So community college is a great option. This is actually what I did before I went to university. It saved me about half the money. You can go to any kind of community college for about $2,500 a year, which sounds like a lot of money. But if you go to the U of A, it costs you about $12,000 a year. So that's a huge financial savings right there. And I know that I was talking to some students at the Loft last night that are planning to go to EA before they actually go down to ASU or somewhere else. And that's a great option. You can still get financial aid for that and just save yourself a little bit of money if money turns out to kind of be something that's getting in your way a little bit. Also, there are wonderful trade schools and stuff around. I have a brother who's a welder, and I think he makes 4 times as much money as I will ever make, and he really likes welding. It's a great career. Lots of different things you can do. Graphic design, you can be a legal assistant, a mechanic. Some of you are probably drawn to serving people, and you might think about being a firefighter or an EMT. So just know that you always have options. You're not stuck just because you don't go to college. Although we'd love to see every single one of you go get your 4-year degree, there are a few other paths out there. So just know that we're supporting you. All right. Stressed about taking the ACT, we can understand that, but you don't need to be stressed. A lot of times I tell my students, just treat it as a practice test. It's actually recommended that you take it more than once. You can treat your first test as just practice, and just know that 57% of students who retake it get a better score than they did the first time around. Also, there is an expense to taking the ACT test. When you take it at your school, they often give it to you for free. In fact, it's always free. But if you sign up again because you'd like to get a better score, there are fee waivers that you can fill out. I think that there's at least 4 that you can take advantage of, which would mean that you would be looking at taking the test, free at school once and 4 more times. 5 times is a lot of times to take the ACT. Most of us probably won't be doing that. But if you ask your counselor, they can help you fill out the fee waiver so that you can take it for free. Also, ACT was looking at just letting their students take separate sections of the test, but they kind of put the brakes on that. And now they have something called super scoring. So whenever you take your ACT test, you're going to let them know who you want these scores reported to. ASU, U of A, maybe BYU, NAU, lots of different schools that you might be looking at, maybe schools that are out of state. If the ACT super scores your test, which I think they typically do just by default, then they're going to report the highest score that you got, say, on math. So if you took the test 3 times, they're going to take the highest math score that you got and average it into your composite score. So don't worry about taking the test and actually maybe hurting yourself a little bit, because usually those super scores are the highest scores. They'll be reported to your school. So you're going to be having your highest composite score sent into those universities. All right. The ACT test, how do we do a good job on it? It is all about pacing and time. The ACT is not actually an incredibly difficult test. It's going to look a lot like the other tests that you've taken, say the AIMS or the AZ Merit. It's very typical to those. What makes it difficult is that you are so short on time, that you don't have a lot of spare minutes to make sure that you're doing your best work, which is what we're typically used to. So what we're mostly going to be practicing is what types of questions we're looking at, but then also how to pace ourselves through every section. There are different ways to do that, and how to make the best use of our time as we go. As I just said, you can't be your usual good student self. You're going to have to learn to use shortcuts, and you're going to have to learn to go quickly, just as quickly as you can, without making silly mistakes. And we're going to learn some techniques for that. All right. So some of the basic strategies that we'll be using throughout the entire test, not dependent on which subject it is, but from the beginning to the end, is something called personal order of difficulty. And all that means is that each question that you're looking at can be divided into a now, later, or never question. In other words, if you're looking at a question on the English test and you can just tell that you know the right answer, you've checked it, it looks good, answer it right then. Don't take any extra time. Treat it as a now question. If it's one that you're not sure about or you're kind of wavering between a couple of answers, I don't know if it's B, I don't know if it's C, circle that as a later question and come back to it later. If, however, you're on, say, maybe math, and they have a really difficult trigonometry question in front of you, and you haven't taken that level of math in high school yet, you don't know how to actually tackle that problem, always treat that as a never question. It really wouldn't matter how much time you spend on it. You're probably not going to be able to answer it. A never question should just be answered using the letter of the day. And we'll talk about the letter of the day as we go forward. But just go ahead, choose the letter of the day, use it so you can save those precious seconds for questions that you can actually tackle. Maybe you have a better background in algebra 1 or 2 than you do in trigonometry. So save your time to actually tackle those questions that you already know how to answer. Don't ever waste precious seconds on never questions. And also don't leave them blank, and we'll talk about why here in a second. Another strategy that you use on these type of tests all the time and that you're also going to want to use on the ACT is just something called process of elimination. Since all 4 of these tests are multiple choice, the right answer will always be on the page. So that's something that should just give you kind of a nice deep breath. Don't worry about it. Somewhere on there, I am looking at the correct answer. So if you can eliminate a couple of wrong answers, A, B, C, D, say, oh, C and D are definitely wrong, so it has to be one of the others. You're giving yourself a better chance of answering the question correctly. So never forget this process of elimination, even if you feel stuck. Try to eliminate at least one wrong answer to give yourself a greater likelihood of answering correctly. All right, and then finally, letter of the day. People that have done some research on taking the ACT test have found that statistically, if you pick a couple of letters and you stick with them throughout the whole test, you are more likely to just kind of fortunately land on the right answer than if you are always changing what letters you're using when you have to kind of guess on a question. So maybe tell your parents before you go in to take the ACT test that day, my letters of the day are going to be A and F, or maybe C and H, something like that. And then stick with those letters throughout the test. You'll just be giving yourself a better chance of answering correctly on those. And we're going to talk about why you would want to use A and F on the English test as we go forward. But just go ahead and know you're not going to want to randomly choose like alphabet soup wise as you go. Pick a couple of letters, stick with them throughout the test. All right. Another important strategy, you're going to try to be going your fastest through this test, which is not typically how we take a test. So make sure that you're breathing. Yes, are you racing the clock? Of course you are. But take really deep breaths through your nose, out your mouth. You're going fast, but you don't want to make weird mistakes. You want to spend time on good questions, not too much time on the bad ones, and just kind of move forward calmly. Don't do anything weird just because you know that you're running out of time. Another very important tip that I can give you is to bring a digital watch. Try to find one in your dad's closet or your uncle's closet, somebody who has one sitting around. Grab one at a thrift shop or a really cheap one from Walmart. You need one that doesn't beep. The ACT has gotten pretty strict about actually if your alarm goes off on your phone or whatever, kind of discounting all of your answers and even escorting people from the test. You want to make sure that it's a quiet digital watch. But typically in the ACT environment, you might have a big clock on the wall, but a lot of times it's going to be an analog clock with the big arms. You're not really going to be able to tell how many seconds you're using on each section of the test. And that's going to be really important. You want to be able to time yourself precisely. So bring a digital watch, make sure that its sounds are turned off if it has sound. All right. Now we need to kind of pick a target score. We're going to be talking about the ACT score chart. So what are you aiming for? I had students who felt like they wouldn't be happy unless they scored somewhere up in the 30s. I mean, that's a pretty steep requirement for some people. That's a pretty high score. Or maybe you just want to get a better score than the last time you took the practice test that maybe you had your freshman year or your 8th grade year. But we're going to want to kind of pick a score, a realistic score that we can aim for so that we have something to work toward. We want to have a goal here. All right, here's how the ACT scoring works so that we even know what kind of goal we're looking at. It's an average of the 4 multiple choice tests. You have English, math, reading, and science on the ACT. A very low score would be a 1, of course. I assume that maybe you could get a 0 if you didn't fill anything out. A perfect score on the ACT is a 36. And just know now that some colleges do require, or they just want to have your essay score, and both of your schools are giving the essay portion of the test at this point. So you don't have to worry about signing up for another test with the essay portion. You do get that at your school now. If you do take it somewhere else, make sure that you take the essay portion there too. All right, this is what your ACT student score report looks like. You can see in the top left that 21 is the composite score. In other words, that student got 19 on math, 18 on science, 24 on English, 23 on reading. All 4 of those get added up, divided by 4, and the composite score, or the ACT score, is 21. That's usually what the college is looking at when you apply. 21 is the average score in the United States, and we'll kind of take a peek at that. All right, here is what the ACT score chart looks like. Just so you know, this is slightly different for every single ACT test. Believe it or not, some ACT tests are easier than others. Of course, some are more difficult. So this table changes slightly because the ACT has to have a way of making it fair across the board because students are taking so many different versions of the test on the same day. This is a way that they sort of even that out. So you can see up here, if you look across the top, scale score of 36, that would mean that you got all 75 questions on the English right, all 60 on the math right, all 40 on the reading right, and all 40 on the science right. And those added up, divided by 4, gave that person a scale score of 36. A few people actually do get perfect scores on the ACT, but I would say it's not something to worry about right now. Look at this score with the percentiles over on the right, and just note that if you score a 28 on your ACT test, that puts you in the top 90% of all students in the United States. That's a very high score and would really give you a great advantage as far as scholarship money goes. It might be a kind of steep goal for some people, but some people may want to take the ACT test and practice it over and over until they can get up into that high 20s range. So if you say that you're scoring, I don't know, maybe like a 20 or so scale score, and you want to get a little bit higher, you can look over to the left and say, you know what, I really need to get 10 or 15 more questions right on the English part of my test to bump up my whole scale score. But this table just kind of gives you an idea of how many questions you would have to get right on each bit to bring up that sort of a composite score. If you look at the highlighted yellow bit, 21 is the average score in the United States for ACT test takers. And actually, maybe that's gone down just a tiny bit with the pandemic and people having to miss a little bit of school. So that score could have gone down. Last time I checked, though, 21 was the average score. And just know that here locally, both in Round Valley and St. John's, our average score in high school is 17. So we already have a little bit of a gap that we're trying to make up sometimes. So just to kind of be realistic about the scores that we're looking for and to try to really bump those up, we kind of need to know what our starting point is. And this little score chart will kind of give you a good idea of how you can look at those numbers and maybe do just a bit better. All right. Another important thing, if you want to retake your ACT test, just know that in December, April, and June, they offer something called the Testing Information Release. If you sign up for this and you pay just a little bit more, then you're going to get all the questions you had in front of you, all the answers you gave. You're going to get an answer key. You're going to get the conversion table for that test. So you're going to know exactly where you went right or wrong. I just want you to know that there are better tests than others, and this is an excellent one to kind of get that really good data back. So if you retest, sign up for December, April, or June and pay the little bit extra for the testing information release report, that's just going to give you a really good idea of how you can do just a bit better going forward. Okay, I don't know what kind of school you're hoping to go to, but just so that you have an idea, the top 10 schools in the United States, say Harvard or something like that, half of the students they admitted had a score of 33 or above. That's an astronomically high score. If you want to go to a school that's really competitive, in other words, lots of students apply, but not a lot of students get in, they're looking for the upper 20s. They want you to score at least a 27, 28, 29 or above to let you into that school. Regular state schools, which a lot of our students like to attend so they can be closer to home, like NAU or the U of A, just to let you attend, they're looking for the lower to mid 20s, maybe a 22 or a 23. But if you want to get really great scholarship money, you're probably going to have to score higher than that. And then again, the average in the United States is about a 21, and locally we're at about a 17. But that just kind of gives you an idea of the different universities, colleges, and what sort of a score they're looking for. All right, here is how the test is structured. There are 4 multiple choice sections and then the writing. It's always given in this order, and some parts of the test are always set up the same. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you're going to be looking at when you take the test. The English test, 75 questions in 45 minutes. Even though that sounds like the most that you would have to do if you look at all the different sections, 75 questions in 45 minutes, it's actually the section where you feel like you have the most time. It's a little bit less rushed than the other sections. On the math section, you're going to be doing 60 questions in 60 minutes. So you might say, hey, Ms. Carter, I have, a minute per question on this. But you can't actually do that on the math. It gets more difficult as you go. Even though at the end they may pepper it with, a few easy questions here and there, you're actually going to be looking at your hardest math questions as you get toward the end. So just know that you want to spend maybe a half a minute or even less in the beginning question so that you have a good minute and a half or 2 on the really difficult ones at the end. Again, if you bump into one that you couldn't possibly figure out, you're just going to use your letter of the day and move on so you're not wasting precious time. Reading and science are set up the same. They're both 40 questions and you have 35 minutes for each section of the test. All of the students that I've ever talked to say that reading and science are the hardest to finish in that amount of time. So you may be using your letter of the day for bits of reading and science. Reading is always set up in the same order. There are 4 passages. If you like reading fiction, you're going to want to do passages 1 and 3 first. If you kind of like nonfiction and more fact-based reading, you're probably going to want to do sections 2 and 4. But we'll talk about that as we get ready for the reading section. Science is pretty difficult. There are all different types of passages, and they're usually ordered in very different ways. So as we get ready for our science portion of the test, we'll be talking about what types of passages you're looking at and how to tackle those. And then finally, the essay, they give you 1 prompt, usually 3 points of view to discuss, and you only have 40 minutes to write an essay. I studied English, and I kind of feel a little bit freaked out whenever I think about writing a good essay in 40 minutes. But we're going to talk about how we can do our best at that because there's not a lot of time to go back and edit, which is what we're used to doing whenever we're writing an essay or trying to do some good writing. We're looking at editing. Not a lot of time to do that on the ACT. All right, so how can I seriously bring up my ACT score? Anyone can add at least 5 points up to 10 points maybe to the very first ACT score that they got. Practicing makes all the difference. There's really no magic bullet for tackling the ACT. You need to practice, practice, practice so you can get used to the timing of the test and kind of knowing what sorts of questions they're going to throw at you. Not only do you practice, you can't just keep taking practice tests for the ACT, but you have to look at what you're getting wrong and then really adjust the way you're tackling the test based on that. Are you making silly mistakes? Do you need to get with your math teacher and maybe practice a certain type of like plane geometry, for a few evenings after school, something like that? But really look at what you're getting wrong and then implement changes based on that information. Okay, for the entire test, I can't emphasize this enough. Vocabulary is hugely important. Vocabulary is peppered throughout this test. It's really hard to practice vocabulary. The best way to sort of master a great, widely ranging, powerful vocabulary is reading. The more you read, the better you will do on the ACT. As you're doing all of this wonderful reading, look up words that you don't know. Read texts that challenge you. There's going to be a lot of academic reading in college. They're going to be having you read things that you probably wouldn't choose to read for yourself. So you're really going to be looking for nonfiction texts that are kind of outside of your comfort zone, texts that push you a little bit for understanding, texts that you have to talk to people about to really understand. And then when you're reading, you're just going to ask yourself the basic questions that you're always used to. What are the main ideas? Whose perspective, whose point of view is this text from? And then when you're thinking about the essay part of your ACT test, if you can just ask yourself, like, what biases do I detect here? What points of view are kind of left out? What's glaringly or maybe subtly missing from this text? Is this something that I could talk about in my essay? If you want to leave an email address or something like that at the Loft or the Lodge, I can send you some high-level texts to tackle, just so that you can start working on your vocabulary, getting used to kind of college level reading. It's different than what we usually do. And definitely, a lot of times these texts aren't things that we would choose to read for ourselves. So some practice goes a long way. I have a handout that I'll be leaving for you at the Loft and the Lodge, and it's just from Prep Scholar. They have a list of the top 150 ACT vocabulary words that always sort of crop up. This might be something that you, I don't know, tuck into your backpack or, throw under your pillow and just kind of look at a few of these words once in a while. Have your parents quiz you. Try folding the sheet in half and saying, like, can I actually say what paradox means, or potent or pensive? If someone is pensive, what does that mean? Can I use it in a sentence? Do I kind of have a general idea of its meaning? Because vocabulary stuff is going to come up a lot here in the ACT. All right. On that same note, a lot of reading makes a really big difference, and not just on the ACT test. But when we're talking about the ACT test, every section of it has a huge emphasis on reading. And a lot of people say that the ACT test is just a great big old reading test. And honestly, they're right. The English section, yeah, a lot of reading. The math section, even though it's mostly very skills heavy, we're talking about algebra, geometry, trigonometry, things like that, they are going to try to trip you up based on the wording of the questions. So you're going to be trying to read very carefully as you go. The reading section of the test, yeah, that's heavy duty reading. So that's another section. Science, even the science teachers I've talked to say that basically the science test is a big old reading test. Can I locate information? Do I know how different pieces of information work together? Those are all reading skills. And then on the writing section, of course, better readers are better writers. And you really want to try to bring the biggest vocabulary you can to the table on this test. There is some online content you can use to help you practice if you have a few minutes. And these are a few of them that you can try. There's student crosswords out there. There's Math Jeopardy out there. There's an English grammar section on FreeRice that's really good at helping you practice maybe grammar that you forgot, things that you haven't actually covered in your classrooms, maybe since 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, that are really useful for the English test. And there are apps for vocabulary. So throw an app on your phone that helps you practice vocabulary. All right. There are some great sections, quizzes and vocabulary. The New York Times has one. Lots of newspapers have vocab sections, basically crosswords, that kind of thing, that can help you kind of nail down that vocabulary just a little bit. Make sure that you're keeping in touch with what's going on in the world. Do you know that there was a huge earthquake in Turkey and Syria? What have you read about that? Just kind of being in touch with current events will mean that you can talk about these things and that you can understand them as you're going through your ACT test. Watch reliable news programs. They're all over the place. Watch a quick little news video on your phone or whatever so you know what's going on, so that you can really be conversant as you're moving forward and trying to apply for college. If you read a news article that's really difficult, discuss it with your parents. If you work somewhere, discuss it with your customers or your teachers or something like that. Tell your friends about the things that you're reading and really dig deeper as you go ahead. Be able to answer all of those really important journalistic questions about the stuff that you're reading. Okay, so what we're going to do now, and typically if you were in class with me, I would just be going through some of the ACT actual questions. If you want to look up this form itself, the ACT people have gotten just a little bit strict about some of their retired tests that are floating around out there. But this is one that they still have available on their website. And if you want to take a picture of this slide with your phone, you can find this practice test at act.org and follow that link right there. And then also, if you want someone to walk you through all of the answers on that test, if you use that YouTube link right there, the gentleman there has scored a perfect score on the ACT and the SAT and coaches other people to do the same thing. And he will walk you through how he got each correct answer on that entire practice test. So that's pretty useful. Let me see if I can pull it up for you.